Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the co-founder and CEO with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with life science companies from across the globe over the past 13 years to help them with everything from virtual advisory boards, digital investigator meetings, online medical education, and everything in between. And since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've also helped pharma companies with large events like corporate meetings, MSL and sales training, innovation hackathons, and many other creative programs. But more importantly, at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations, we can work with the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, healthcare leaders to all work to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited to having one of these digital thought leaders at the table with me today. This is actually Mike Cook. Mike is following the completion of his engineering degree. Mike Cook quickly became one of the youngest leaders in his field. At the age of 24, Mike managed a 300-person team that was responsible for the operations of enterprise broadband telecommunication networks across the country for almost a decade. Mike actually earned his MBA before stepping into leading a series of successful tech companies. Today, Mike invests his time as founder and CEO of a company called Identos. They're developing access control software that redefines digital trust in a way that's really open, dynamic, and very scalable. Mike's strategy is to focus specifically on the value chain of digital solutions and global standards that focus on sustainability as well as scale for the next generation of data access and control. Mike has led Identos since its inception with 5 employees, so starting off with just 5 employees, through startup to scale up, enabling a trustworthy data economies with innovative and dynamic access control software that's used not only domestically, but is also referenced globally today. Welcome, Mike. So happy to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Love it. So you have become one of the youngest leaders in this field. You also have had a really interesting and colorful career trajectory. You know, again, COO roles at Spoke Technologies and Prest Interactive. Tell us a little bit about what things you chose to do and how you end up landing in the position you're in today.
Yeah, I mean, I'll color it first with, cutting my teeth in a career at one of the largest companies here in Canada, Bell Canada, and jumping swiftly after a decade or more at Bell into the smallest company, which was essentially employee number 1, and all the good and bad that kind of comes with that. It is probably the impetus for one of the single largest learning opportunities that my career has ever taken on. You can be trained, until the cows come home in corporate life and do an MBA, but until you're at the helm of that one-man ship and growing it to 46 strong like we are today, you haven't quite learned it all yet. My career journey has been a fantastic one. I had an amazing opportunity. I'll talk about this in the advice later if you ask me for advice for people, but be careful what you wish for is the kind of the lead in for that. I had the opportunity to get what I wished for at Bell a number of times and grow my career in a really fantastic way. And that theme has continued on through my journey with startups and scale-ups.
Beautiful. So tell us a little bit about that transition from becoming a COO to going ahead and founding your own company. So again, you're saying at the end of 1 employee. What gave you the inspiration and what was the problem statement you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I mean, first, before we went after a problem statement, it was making sure that what we spent our time in as humans was purpose-driven. That, we could imagine ourselves and our families, our loved ones benefiting from what we do every day. And I think also looking to find a niche. It's a very busy technology space in the world, and the pace at which technology changes is so rapid. that we felt it was important to find not just something we could feel great about, but also a niche space where we could create ourselves some competitive elbow room, and drive value, essentially. And the healthcare market was the market that kind of called us. It was our calling. We took a number of pivots and turns around product market fit through that journey. And the problem statement we landed on really centered in on helping people navigate what is a very fragmented set of digital silos in our lives today. And exploiting that niche opportunity allowed us to develop IP, allowed us to influence standards bodies, and eventually build our brand around solving that very complicated problem.
So why don't we actually start off with describing what exactly Identos is?
Yeah, Identos provides a digital identity and authorization technology, specifically in Canada in healthcare. Together, our digital navigation application and our digital wallet combined create a digital front door for hospitals to introduce a new relationship with patients, in which patients can take their application and it becomes their portal into all things downstream in the ecosystem for that care provider. So as easy as discovering a service, it's a thumbprint away to access it and to share your data. And so that's primarily, the product technology stack that we're driving here in Canada. And we work with a number of partners in that space because there's no one killer app in healthcare. And so one of the best parts about working in this space is getting introduced to all the great thinkers and entrepreneurs and problem solvers who are solving what I call a health job today. And they're looking for an opportunity to be introduced to patients and solve their health jobs for them as well.
So before Identos came into the scene, tell us or paint the picture, specifically the patient journey, of what it was like having to try to navigate, work through the various silos that you were earlier describing.
Yeah, so I mean, the patient journey today is one that is reactive to a health event for the most part. And that health event might drive you specifically to a point of care in our healthcare landscape. So a critical care event will bring you into a hospital. Once you're in that hospital, you may have digital services made available to you, whether it is having to go, create an account to be able to access your diagnostics imaging, as an example, when you leave. Some patients walk out with a paper copy of their discharge summary. And then they immediately go home and have to relay those messages to an in-home care provider who doesn't have a copy of that discharge summary, who's trying to provide them care. And so you can very quickly start to see the number of touch points in a single event where there's no continuity, there's no connective tissue between the journey.
So in some ways, Identos, would you say, is almost like the bridge to allow communication between portals?
I would say it is the way to put a citizen or a human in control of their relationship between organizations, between data silos, to participate as a single user across 3 organizations and 3 systems or 10, without having to be 10 different people to each of the systems that they log into. Right?
So when we think about IP and technology in general, we hear about all kinds of things that are out there today. I mean, obviously, there's the age-old email. We also obviously know the web, everybody's kind of on it. And then we hear about newer technologies like blockchain. We're thinking specifically about, decentralized autonomous organizations and smart contracts. And this very essence of the word trust is and will Identos leverage this technology, and really kind of what are you using right now for your platform?
Yeah, I would say we're founded in open standards, and some of the new emergent technology you're talking about is making its way through the standards bodies at a pace that is probably accelerated by the current day and age, particularly living in a pandemic. But yeah, so we do take advantage of some of the technology specs that are derived from that decentralized identity. We're implementing some components of that here in Ontario as one of our projects, even this year. And I think that like every technology, it's a tool set, and so some tools are good for one job and not for another. And so when you look at getting hyped about technology, you have to really get beyond that and think about what is the problem I'm trying to solve and what's the best tools for that. I think that the emergent standards around verifiable credentials and distributed identity start to get us really closer to unlocking that human control, that human becomes the point of integration, essentially. And you can really start to disentangle or disintermediate what is already a very complicated interconnection of systems. So, I'm a firm believer that technology is the place we have to get to. We're a little ways in our infancy, I'll say, and seeing it kind of come to life in the healthcare context right now, but very positive.
So you bring up a really important point, which is this whole idea around credential verification. So I just want to double click on this for a few minutes. This is really, in some people's worlds, the bane of their existence, because currently we use passwords. We're kind of elevating or graduating to things like biometrics and fingerprints and facial scanning and what have you. Tell us a little bit about what the pros and cons are. What is the conversations that are happening around this very important piece around verification of identity?
Yeah, verification of identity is a foundational component. I think that we are all familiar with the username and password kind of situation we have today. The average Joe has 120 accounts and usernames and passwords. That creates a significant security pressure on the systems at whole because of password reuse and a number of natural human phenomenon that kind of work against security. And so these notions of issuance of credentials is really key to the forward-looking kind of self-sovereign or blockchain identity solutions where, once you've been verified by a party, that credential can be issued and signed by an authoritative source and held by you in your phone, right? And that allows you to be you to a number of parties who are capable of verifying the signature of that. It's a very cryptographically kind of supported technology. And so it's not necessarily that the average person is going to understand what's happening under the hood, but you're going to find, just as you carry your driver's license in your wallet today, tomorrow you'll be carrying a digital version of that in your phone, and you'll be able to show portions of it to people and not the entire face of it, which contains all your personal information. And so identity verification is critical. What's great about the emergent technology space and mobile devices is it allows us to create a security posture surrounding these devices and the day-over-day improvements in their security to distribute the attack surface somewhat and rely more on that authentication at the edge. And so, you can be trusted in more places with that credential as a result.
It's kind of interesting because a lot of people have that experience now that they're downloading a new app, such as the Identos app or others similar to it. And, there's always this sort of sign in, login process. Immediately, like people are given multiple choices, including signing up through Facebook, Google, et cetera, or with your email. Say people, for example, decide to log into your system using Google. Do they put themselves at risk by now suddenly there's this one entity that now has their passwords? If they ever get hacked, are they at a greater risk by using a single entry point for all of their different accounts?
I would say when you pick a Google or an Apple to be your I'm going to call it a credential service provider, the person that runs the process of making sure it's you every time you log in, and they make sure you have a strong password. They make sure that you use two-factor authentication, those types of things. Companies such as these do represent a significant improvement in security posture. They have a very large business founded on developing better and better practices around managing that credential over time, and the trust and integrity of the brand depends on it. And so when you are using a credential service provider, I think you're walking into a place of convenience and better security. It's the right mixture. And I would probably recommend it as a credential provider. When you connect with an app or service, and it lets you connect your Facebook account, your Google account, you have to read the terms of service to make sure that you're also not giving up your data at the same time. But I think that's part of the education and awareness for people these days.
Absolutely. You brought up an important point. You used the word edge computing. For those people who are listening and don't really understand what that means, please explain what that is and where Identos fits with edge computing.
Yeah, edge computing is a pretty broad topic where people are distributing computational power over across a number of devices. In the context of my statement, I'm talking about moving some components of the security posture out to the edge, using your face biometric of your phone and your thumbprint and other things inherent in the device to essentially bring a security layer at the edge device, which can drive authentication authorization into central services, as an example. So that's how we protect a credential in your phone today. When you download a digital credential into a wallet on your phone, that wallet has security components that are protected by the phone, secure enclaves and the like. And that's where we see a strong kind of impetus to use biometrics as an example locally on the device. I'm a big fan of biometrics at the edge. I do sometimes get concerned around biometrics being used centrally, because once you lose a biometric, you can't really get it back. When someone has your thumbprint, you can't change your thumbprints. So I think it's a relatively smart decision to kind of keep that at the edge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You've also mentioned as well some of the concepts around federated privacy exchange. Tell us a little bit about what that means and how this applies to Identos.
Yeah, I mean, the term is one that we created as part of a specification we developed to help educate the market on some standards we were evolving as a company. And it really, kind of to sum it up, it's a way of thinking about how to minimize data collection and data leakage through the process of connecting a human across multiple organizations through a journey. And so one is to put them in control of their personal identity and their personal data, but another is to make sure that they're part of the disclosure and consent of flowing information between those parties. And we took it a step further to say, well, how can we develop technologies where the system itself will not collect information about the information that was used and the parties at play, right? And so that is some of the IP that Identos has developed, and it's some of the contributions we've made to the open standards. And you'll find that parallels very nicely with some of the blockchain advantages that are out in the market today being explored.
How do people manage this concept of their identity being distributed to multiple areas? How does that get reined in or managed?
I think the hardest thing for us to solve as an industry is making sure people don't have to know about that. When one of our customers brings a patient in to use their digital app, you're never going to see the term wallet in there. You're never going to see distributed identity. It's all built into the user experience, and we can't really afford the time it's going to take to educate people on the security architectures, which over time get replaced and change anyways. So it's really important, and I'll say that I think that's a strength of our company, and a foundational principle of the work we do is, like, the users matter. They're paramount to the equation here. If you can't help them not have to understand the technology and help them make good decisions, you're not going to be helping them very much at all. You're going to be creating more problems. Add that to the usernames and passwords that they all manage. So we try to build that security layer into the user experience as much as possible.
People are playing with technology every day. People have at least 3 screens in front of them at any given moment. They're utilizing Fitbits and smartphones and smart watches and everything in between. And there's more and more of that coming into the market. What is your thoughts and what is the planning process around the interoperability of multiple disparate systems, all using their own edge computing systems, speaking to each other, and being able to sort of maintain some semblance of security in all of this? What does that look like for Identos?
I mean, under the hood, it's very deep, and it's foundationally pinned on a new concept, or a newer concept emergent, is trust frameworks, which defines, the policies and the processes by which somebody can demonstrate assurance, essentially, of an individual. And so as trust frameworks are utilized more and more around the world, people will be able to be recognized as trustworthy digitally in more and more places. One layer down from that would be the authentication and authorization protocols, which I think are already pretty consistently recognized around the world, or there's growing gold standards in that space. And then the last, which I think is probably the trailing tail of all of this in the digital economy is data standards. And so in the healthcare space, we've seen a fastly maturing FHIR data standard, which represents how you share and how you talk about health data. That standard is moving very, very quickly around the world. And when you have the data standards, you have the protocol standards, and you've got the trust standards, now you can start to really open up the market and see how applications and people and organizations can interact together.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that your tool provides is something called a tapped-in community bundle. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I think it for us, it's a marketing concept to help our customers who have a natural community that they're serving, bring their community to a relationship in our mobile navigation product, and make everything that they're going to need to consume and use in that community one tap away. And so, we try to think about the experiences that drove us as consumers to essentially what drove consumerism to propel the digital tech markets we've seen over the last decade or more. That Apple experience is not new to anybody. I have one relationship with the App Store. When I'm looking for something, I go and look there. And when I find something I want, even if I'm paying for it, it's still only a thumbprint away, right? And so the tapped-in bundle that we offer is really about identifying communities where that's a repeatable model and helps people get access and get the best benefit out of that community.
Absolutely. And you also have something called a community navigator. How does that work in your system?
Yeah, that is the mobile application that we bundle together with our digital identity products. And it allows our customers to brand, configure, and change their digital presence with their community. And so you'll see, one day, 10 items available inside of one of our health navigator products with our health authorities here in Ontario. The next week, you might see 3 more. They're constantly configuring, updating, and adding more available services into that marketplace, and gives our customers the ability to kind of really control their brand and not be so dependent on, a third-party vendor product essentially as part of their community management.
So this actually feels a little abstract to me. So just to give people a concrete view on what the customer experience would be like. Let's just say, for example, I went to get an X-ray, I don't know, for a broken arm. So I show up there and I realize that they have some ability for me to log in, using Identos to go in and be able to see my scans online. Tell us a little bit about what happens from that point forward when I come back. And then what happens afterwards? What is the sustainability and the manageability of that engagement and that relationship with the Identos app?
Yeah, I'll give an example of one of our customers. Essentially, if you were to walk into the Niagara Health region and have a reason to be in the facility, you'd be able to download the Niagara Health Navigator app. That application allows you to quickly create a trusted relationship with the hospital. You can rate your in-hospital experience. You can do a number of things related to your visit, including appointment bookings. Once you've left the hospital and you want to see your diagnostics images, you would find essentially a tile in the navigator that is pointing you in that direction. That would open up a third-party application called Pocket Health. Pocket Health would essentially say, we recognize that you're coming from Niagara Health with your Ontario trusted account. Would you like to log in? And the patient would be introduced to a new digital service. They barely starting their car and on their journey home, and they'd have their digital images ready for them.
So it sounds to me like you have been able to curate multiple different apps into a centralized, if you will, wallet vault, something that's really secure and safe for a consumer.
Yeah, our customers curate. Healthcare is local, so no matter what region I sell to, there'll be a different app, a different set of services, and so that was kind of the main kind of premise behind the Navigator being so customizable per region, was that we can't really say what a hospital or health region is going to be offering, but we do know healthcare is local today, and so we had to make sure that whatever was the service that you might need in that community, our customers could easily connect you with that without generating a new relationship for you to manage and a new username and password.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So there's advantages for multiple different organizations to utilize and leverage Identos. And one that stands out is really health information exchanges. Tell us some examples of things that you have organized in that arena. And can you give us an example of one of those relationships?
Yeah, so they're pretty prevalent in the healthcare landscape, and they're premised on connecting up the large healthcare systems to communicate. And so the trust model is very, very different than the one we have for consumers today. The trust model implies that if large healthcare organizations and systems are connected to the health exchange, then at the edge, at that system, any users who are authorized in those systems are naturally authorized to connect with data across the systems, which may or may not hold true depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. But it's a very broad security kind of authorization policy, if you would. So what we've been able to do is successfully demonstrate how to use those pipes to identify the patients at the end of those systems and allow the patients to potentially ride on the same rails that have been laid down. And the government spent a lot of money. I think there's over 90 HIEs, or health information exchanges, in the US alone. And so instead of having this technology kind of grow old and have less use cases over time, how can we leverage those pipes to connect a citizen journey or a patient journey to essentially dial in access to their records in any of the systems that they've been in?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Certainly, the other core group that I think could benefit from this is people like third-party payers. So either governmental payers for health or health insurance companies. Can you give us some concrete examples of how they're leveraging Identos in their business models?
Yeah, payers and insurers are an interesting one. Motivations aside, like there's a natural need for the discovery. They have a network. They have a network of parties and affiliates. It's already part of their business model. And so leveraging a technology like this that allows them to connect their members to more things without friction, I think is kind of mission critical for the next phase of the journey. I think that's going to become part of the competitive advantage for them. As we look south of the border, it's actually quite competitive. Here we have a single payer model here in Canada, and I think that the benefit is citizen convenience, and it's the ability to reduce the costs for introducing new digital services across large portions of the provinces here in Canada.
Totally makes sense. Hospitals and healthcare providers currently are inundated with new technologies. We all realize that people are habit formers. They like to do things that are easy, that don't require a lot of constant thinking and thinking through. So we like to do things that are feeling automatic. So we're automaticity. So, we already are asking our physicians and our healthcare providers to leverage electronic health records. Do they want another thing to think about? Tell us a little bit about how hospitals and healthcare providers have incorporated this in such a way that it becomes a more seamless piece of their overarching workflow.
Yeah, so I described a little bit about the Niagara Health Navigator and how they encourage patients to create a relationship with the region's health system. It's not just the hospital. This application will become more and more available to any of the health touch points you have in your journey. That was one of their stated objectives. Here in Ontario specifically, the government has launched a formation of health providers regionally called health teams. And I think there's about 50 of them across the province, kind of forcing the issue of it's not just about the hospital. The hospital just happens to be a very prominent player across these communities, but you've got home care, you've got community care, you got occupational therapists out in the community supporting the entire care journey. And the province has made some stated goals around bringing that together. Our digital health record or portals, they're only one piece of the equation, right? That's a view access to things in the past. It's not necessarily going to drive the type of engagement we need with patients to see the next generation of digital healthcare evolve.
A lot of people who listen to and watch our show are from the pharmaceutical industry. So just throwing this out here, what would be the potential advantage, and why would they approach Identos in a potential collaboration or partnership?
Yeah, I'll say from my customer's perspective, I think they're already working. Hospitals and health regions work with pharmaceutical companies. They're part of the ecosystem of evolving and innovating, essentially, in the health tech space. And so, one of the things that's always really important in that is trials, introduction to patients, discovery of what's available. And so, I think that the Health Navigator and the work we're doing with Ontario Health teams could really drive and foster a great partnership between pharma companies who are looking for people who are willing and interested to participate and are qualified, and just need to discover the opportunity to participate. And so it presents a really interesting opportunity for matchmaking, or almost a marketplace of supply and demand, if you would. We're going to keep innovating in pharma tech. We're going to keep needing to have interested parties who could benefit from that to participate early on. And so, how can we reduce that friction, just like we do in other organizations across a health team?
How are you going to manage some of the questions and queries around data ownership, security of that data? You hear a lot of pushback on people, sending information in aggregate versus individual, like you're saying, matchmaking, and people considering that being a breach of their privacy. What are some of the legal and regulatory considerations that Identos has either undergone or considering in order to provide that really interesting and provocative and important service to pharmaceutical and really, quite frankly, discovery innovation hubs to be able to do that kind of research?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with disclosure and control for the patient, right? And so it's something we haven't seen much of in the past, but it does solve for some of the challenges in the regulatory regimes around the world. And here in Ontario, I use the example, there's defined roles, who's allowed to do what with patients and their data at what point in the journey. And so, if you're holding data, you're a custodian and you're bound by legislation and law to protect that data on behalf, and to not use it for things that were not part of the terms of service. Identos helps bring that connection point with the human down to a granular level. What data am I sharing, and with who, and for how long? And can I change my mind later if I want? And when you bring the human into the center of it and you put them in control, you start to unbind some of the rules and roles. It is their data. They own their data. And can you ensure that when they take advantage of a service or they accept to use a digital service, that they prominently have the ability to see what the impacts of that are, what the terms of service and the privacy policy of those companies are related to their data. And that's been a really difficult thing to solve. And so by bringing the health navigation service and digital wallet together, we have a single control plane. The citizen can see what they've done. They can see what they've disclosed. They can change their mind, right?
In the future, do you see having even more augmented data development on an N=1, so per patient basis? For example, if they did a 23andMe genetic test, or they had some other kind of diagnostics, or they're a real biohacker and they do 24-hour glucose monitoring and they've tapped in and they're now signaling this information. Is there, or will there be, smart algorithms, AI, that builds through machine learning this ability to start making smart suggestions, doing other things, being prognostic and predictive of things and outcomes that might be happening? What does that look like with Identos?
I think that is the next wave of innovation. Once the data becomes available and trustworthy, the next wave of innovators are the folks who make that data tell us a story. More importantly, that help us drive heightened engagement. We've learned from past studies that an engaged patient performs, much better than a disengaged patient. And so how can we help people become much more active in their healthcare journey and make their data sing, make their data tell the story that helps them in their journey? I think that, we've already, we have a lot of data in our lives. Some of it's actually quite valuable. Some of it may be metadata and kind of transient in nature. The folks who come up with the right patterns of which pieces of data will tell the right story to help drive a health outcome, that's the next wave of innovation for us. Yeah.
It's really interesting, especially as we, here in Canada, Ontario specifically, but quite frankly, globally, a light has been illuminated on the disparities and inadequacies of healthcare, especially around senior care and people in long-term care facilities. one has to ask the question about how do caregivers deal with information, especially with other siblings or other family members or legal guardians. There's legal documents, there's financial documents. How does Identos help to solve and bridge some of those challenges between caregivers?
Yeah, I think that we discount a significant portion of what healthcare costs are by not paying attention to the informal caregivers in the lives of patients. And I long for the day when the Sandwich app is available and people like me who take care of the parents and their kids can have a control center to take delegated responsibility, and both for my parents' healthcare and my children's. A lot of us are finding ourselves in that situation. So Identos has actually built delegation into the technology suite that we've brought to market. We believe it's critically important for us to get this right, and it's going to be an important driver of adoption. As a matter of fact, the most engaged people are those people in the middle who are helping somebody else with their healthcare, not themselves.
Absolutely. It's so absolutely essential and going to be a big piece of what the future looks like as well. So all of this is said, it's very interesting. At the end of the day, you're a for-profit company and you make money. So what exactly is the business model here? Who is paying for Identos?
Our customers often have a community of users who are underserved, who are looking to develop a growing set of digital services for them to be available. We're become a piece of the infrastructure. So, a health team is a great example here in Ontario who would be a buyer of our product. They would license our software. They might license some support to go with it. Our job is to continuously make it easier for them, as not necessarily technologists. All of our customers are not technologists, so it's in our best interest to keep making software platform technology that's easy to use and configure, that's secure, but really puts them in a leading advantage with the user experience for their end users who are in their community.
Absolutely. And I guess the other question, of course, is that as part of these business models and people finding it worthy and of high value, what sorts of metrics, measurements, parameters of success are people or should people be looking at when they start integrating the use of sort of these data vaults, something like Identos? What should people be looking for in order to say, yes, this was a worthwhile effort or worthwhile high value investment?
Yeah, I think adoption and follow is critical. Back to the whole user experience is paramount. You can build all the technology in the world and have all the best kind of intentions, but if you can't deliver something that is discoverable, is meaningful for people, you've missed the mark. And so below that, there's a bunch of sub-metrics, I'm sure, that have critical importance. Time to market, the meeting the regulatory hygiene and compliance requirements are all critical as well, but all for nothing if you can't get user adoption.
We're in the middle of an election in Canada, a federal election. Lots of different opportunities for a revamp of legal, regulatory infrastructure, all kinds of other things. If you were to sort of throw something in there of a special request based on everything that you've known to date, what would be some of the regulatory and legal changes that you think that we would need to make in order to move the agenda or the mission and vision of Identos in the future?
Yeah, we think about this often, especially during election cycles. I think for Canadian government to make sure that Canadian technology has every advantage to scale to global technology players, that's mission critical. And their innovation agenda, which was pretty light in this election cycle, is really important to companies like us. And so, we continue to work in and out of election cycles to try to make sure that innovation agenda is prominent in their platforms. I would say on a regulatory side of the house, while we can continue to chase the leading kind of privacy acts around the world, whether it's GDPR or the California Privacy Act, I think that getting out ahead of those privacy acts and actually empowering citizens with rights, citizens with their data, would change the nature of how any company is delivering services to them, and would even the playing field against some of the the FANG based kind of entrants here in Canada, but will ultimately protect us long term.
We would be remiss if we didn't get into some sort of a discussion about cybersecurity. This has been a major issue since the early 2019 and beyond. Some of the recent ravaging that's happened, and I don't think people have realized some of the impact of some of the breaches that have been occurring. How do we start and manage this dialogue around cybersecurity and hacks, and what do we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying a significant portion of the breaches that make headlines today were the direct result of poor hygiene, people not being responsible, held accountable. And so back to your regulatory question, there has to be enough teeth in the regulatory system to make sure people behave accordingly. But we also talked about usernames and passwords, right? And the human factor. This is bringing it down to the most broad kind of challenges beyond those hygiene ones. I think that we'll continue to see breaches. So we need to continue to hold up a high bar and continue to raise that bar on the posture, right? There's processes like privacy impact assessment, threat risk assessments in every industry that are there for a reason. I could see some of that being elevated, together with teeth in the regulatory regimes. Would start to see a little bit less headlines, I think, in the breach side of things.
Do we reframe what data security means, and sort of extending the conversation? I think not getting too much into politics here, but we sort of see the mandates and the political clout around a Chinese communist government and sort of the things that they do around data and how they're driving certain technologies forward. And then you look at sort of the mandate and the political system in in the US, Canada, North America, et cetera. Are we in the long or mid to long term at a disadvantage based on how governments, for example, are looking at data security, privacy, and what it means to own your own data?
I do not think we're at a disadvantage. I do think that we do need to evolve the regulatory regimes, and our political stance amongst other players globally needs to change. I do believe that we are a trustworthy nation, and we have a distinct advantage, as a matter of fact, to get the right regulation, the right, call it citizen ownership or rights over their data, to be world leading, to be recognized as that, to be supporting the world who struggles to kind of make that data, part of the regular freedoms we expect as citizens, right? And that could create new industry, a new opportunity for us. And we are an IP nation if we get this right.
I love that you said that this could be potentially a brand new industry, and I think that's very insightful. Really good concept there. We've talked a lot about healthcare. That's obviously the key audience that listens to us, but there's a lot of other potential extensions, if you will, of Identos and the whole system and platform you've created, especially around smart cities. Can you actually speak a little bit about what we're doing and what some of the interesting things that are happening in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to lead with one of the headlines and close out on our privacy conversation at the same time here. As a lot of people are familiar with the Queen's Key project that was led by a Google held company in, I'm going to say 2019 is when it started to wrap up. It was a very large smart city initiative that got a lot of people's attention. It was very much, a reminder that we do not have the data protections in place. We do not have the regulatory regimes and protections, and citizens acknowledge that as part of their pushback against, what was to be a very smart city on the waterfront of Toronto. So, smart cities are not necessarily where we're not at the Jetsons yet, but we're seeing deep technology advancements in efficiency, right? Meters and alarm systems, traffic light innovators who are helping optimize traffic flow. well, it's very kind of utilitarian side of efficiency right now. The consumer-based advancements we're making are still somewhat siloed. A parking app, which changed my life in Toronto, by the way, and improved maintenance in the city because people are able to easily report potholes on their street. So what we haven't seen a ton of is integration of that citizen journey and citizen experience beyond a self-serve kind of portal experience. So there's so many touch points across the city and its constituents and its businesses, and it's an opportunity for us to, similar to healthcare, connect the silos and connect that journey. And we haven't quite seen it take that track yet.
Love it. And I think it's a wonderful vision, and lots to think about there. So I think we're just about to close up, but I just want to let everybody know, if anybody is interested in connecting with Mike, discussing further some options, potential collaboration or partnership discussions, we will be leaving his contact details in the show notes below. So please be on the lookout for that. If you enjoyed this show, we also encourage you to check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations that we have with physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, patients. We bring people together in the Insight Touchpoints platform that Impetus owns through various asynchronous and synchronous touchpoints. And we do this with white glove service. So we actually ask a series of questions. We get people to move ideas forward, policies, new concepts, and this is actually how we get work done. For those of you who are showing up today, we'd really appreciate if you can like and subscribe to our channel, and would love if you could give us a review on iTunes. We want to thank everybody for their fantastic time today. We wish everybody a great day. And thank you, Mike, for a wonderful discussion.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Natalie.